Uncle stole my life, adopted me for money laundering. I exposed him at a family gathering. I never thought I'd hear people whispering about my affairs at my own mother's funeral. But there I was, standing beside the casket, my pink iPhone case trembling in my hand, listening as my Uncle Dennis told a cluster of relatives that my son didn't even look like my husband. That was the moment I realized Dennis hadn't just ruined my reputation, he had orchestrated my entire downfall. It started 2 years earlier, during rush hour traffic on a rainy Thursday in April. I remember the smell of wet dog coming from the back seat because my lad, Scout, had rolled in the mud at the park. I was late for work, my phone was buzzing nonstop, and I was just trying to hold my life together after my divorce. My rent had jumped to $1,200 a month, and I'd been skipping therapy sessions to save money. My depression medication had stopped working entirely, and I didn't even have the energy to find a new psychiatrist. Dennis was my mother's youngest brother, charming, funny, always their favorite uncle. He'd show up at family gatherings with expensive whiskey and stories about his business ventures. I used to believe he cared. He'd call me Brookie, the nickname my mom used before she passed. When Mom got sick, Dennis took over everything of the estate, the medical decisions, even the funeral plans. I didn't question it then. I was too busy trying to juggle my job at the design firm and take care of my younger brother Paul, who was still in college. Brookie, don't worry about it, Dennis said one night when I asked about the estate paperwork. You just focus on your kid and your job, I'll handle the boring stuff. That's what he said, but handling the boring stuff meant draining our family's trust. The first red flag came at Mom's 61st birthday party, her last one before she died. We'd gotten her a cake with strawberries on top, her favorite. Everyone was laughing, and for one rare moment it felt like the family I used to know. Dennis had too much whiskey and made a toast. To my sister, the real heart of this family, he said, his words slurring. And to Brooklyn, for giving us the next generation, though we'll see who the father really is, huh? Everyone laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. I felt my stomach twist, like the floor had fallen out beneath me. I forced a smile, but I couldn't even taste the cake. That night, Paul came into my room. Brooke, what was that about? He asked quietly. I don't know, I said, though the answer was already creeping in like poison. After Mom's death, the whisper spread fast. Someone I didn't know who started telling people that I'd had an affair with my boss. That my son, Caleb, wasn't my ex-husband's child. It was Dennis. He told my coworkers. He told Paul's college friends. He even called my landlord, warning him I might skip town without paying. I started getting side glances at the grocery store. The clerk, of the same woman who'd watched me buy Caleb's baby formula years earlier, looked at me with pity. I saw you on the news, she said once, voice soft. I'm so sorry about everything. The news. Dennis had somehow leaked parts of the family's estate dispute to the media, making me look like I'd forged Mom's will. My world collapsed piece by piece. I lost my job. Friends stopped calling. Caleb's schoolmates' parents stopped inviting him to birthday parties. And every time I tried to report the harassment, the threatening calls, the slander, the stolen mail, it went nowhere. That's when I found out why. The officer who handled my reports, Officer Jeremy Hall, was Dennis's cousin on his father's side. He'd been bribed to lose my statements. I remember sitting in the precinct, the fluorescent lights humming above me, as he said, maybe it's best to just let family handle family matters, MS Lane. Family matters. By then, my depression had deepened into something darker. I had panic attacks at night, sometimes waking up gasping, clawing at my chest because I was sure I was dying. My therapist, Dr. Rowan, tried adjusting my meds, but nothing seemed to help. Brooklyn, she said during one session, your nervous system is stuck in survival mode. This kind of betrayal rewires the brain. It's trauma. She was right. Still, I tried to hold it together for Paul, for Caleb. Until one afternoon, Paul came home pale and shaking. Brooke, he whispered, you need to see this. He showed me a bank statement from the family trust. Hundreds of thousands gone, transfers made into shell accounts under Dennis's name. That was the day I stopped crying and started planning. After Paul showed me the missing money, I stopped being scared and started taking notes. I opened a new folder on my pink iPhone labeled Dennis Proof. Every text, every voicemail, every odd thing he said, I documented it. At first, I told myself it was just for my own sanity. But deep down, I knew Dennis had taken something bigger than money. He'd stolen my mother's legacy and turned my family against me. Paul was furious. He's a thief, Brooke, we need to go to the police again, he said, slamming the bank statement on the table. I sighed. The police are his cousins, remember? Officer Hall literally told me to drop it. Paul's jaw clenched. Then we go above him. But every door we knocked on led to another wall of silence. The county clerk's office lost our estate dispute filing. The lawyer Mom had trusted for 20 years suddenly refused to represent me. Conflict of interest, he muttered before hanging up. It felt like Dennis had burrowed into every corner of our lives like mold you couldn't see until the whole house stank. I started having nightmares again. In one, I stood at the edge of my mother's grave while Dennis whispered lies into people's ears, and one by one, they turned their backs on me. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, convinced someone was watching me. My therapist told me to write things down. Keep a record of events, Dr. Rowan said softly during one of our sessions. Even if you can't act yet, you'll have evidence later. So I did. I wrote down dates, times, even the smell of things because trauma, she said, is stored in the senses. June 11, 2023, 5:42 p.m. Rush hour traffic, smell of wet dog again. Dennis called. He said, Brock, maybe if you went sussy about Caleb's dad, people wouldn't have questions. Click. The next week, a letter arrived from the State Child Services Office. An anonymous tip claimed I was unfit, that I left Caleb home alone and abused prescription meds. I nearly collapsed right there on the porch. I knew it was him. During my first marriage, I had learned exactly how men like Dennis operated. My ex-husband, Ryan, was a charmer to all apologies and smiles in public, then cold silence at home. He'd gaslight me until I believed every fight was my fault. Dennis was worse because he had the whole family as his audience. When I left Ryan, I thought I'd escape manipulation forever. But somehow Dennis found all the old wounds and picked them open again. I met with Paul at our mom's old house, the one Dennis promised to maintain. The lawn was overgrown, the mail piled high. Inside, the air smelled like mildew and loss. We went through drawers, searching for documents. That's where we found it, a black USB drive hidden inside Mom's jewelry box. Paul plugged it into his laptop, and there they were, scanned copies of wire transfers, notarized forms, even an audio file labeled Dennis Confession WAV. My hand shook as we listened. Dennis's voice, half drunk, saying, "Brooklyn will never figure it out, the trust's under my name now. She's too emotional to fight back anyway." Then laughter. Another male voice, Officer Halls. "Just make sure my cut's there by Monday." I felt sick. It was one thing to suspect, but hearing it out loud, that broke something inside me. "We have to take this to someone higher," Paul said. "Maybe the state attorney." I nodded, even though I felt numb. The next morning, my car tires were slashed. The following day, Paul's email was hacked. That's when I started realizing how deep it went. Dennis wasn't just stealing. He was protecting something darker. I began piecing together Mom's old financial statements and noticed something off, payments to an adoption agency from 20 years ago. But that didn't make sense. I wasn't adopted. At least, I didn't think I was. When I confronted Dennis about it at a family cookout, his house smelled like cigar smoke and old beard. He laughed in my face. "Brooke, you always were curious. Some stones are better left unturned. Why were Mom and Dad paying an adoption agency in 2003? I asked. He smirked. "Maybe you should ask why they had to." He walked away, leaving me shaking so hard I could barely breathe. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air was thick, humid, and every creak of the house made my skin crawl. I kept checking the locks, replaying that smug smile in my mind. I knew he was hiding something massive, with something about me. By morning, I had a plan. Paul and I would dig deeper. We'd find where the money went, who helped him, and what that adoption payment meant. But I wasn't prepared for the next discovery, the one that would change everything I knew about my life, my parents, and myself. Because when I finally pulled the birth records, I learned the truth Dennis had been laughing about. I was never my parents' biological daughter. I'd been adopted, and not out of love, but as part of a money laundering scheme. And Dennis had known all along. I sat in my car outside the county records office for a full hour before I could even start the engine. The papers lay across the passenger seat, official seals and all adoption records, bank statements, notarized signatures. My name, Brooklyn Lane. My parents' names, Michael and Sarah Lane. And underneath, in smaller print, the words that made my stomach twist: adoption finalized on October 19, 1992, facilitated by Lockridge Agency Trust. That was the same name that appeared on the wire transfers Dennis had hidden. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was too thick, like I was underwater. Every memory, my mom's lullabies, my dad teaching me to ride a bike, the strawberry cake she baked for my birthdays, it all blurred into something false. Manufactured. But when I told Paul, he didn't believe it at first. "There's no way," he said, his face pale. "They loved you, Brooke." "I know they did," I whispered. "But they didn't adopt me for love." We spent that night combing through the files. That's when we found an old court document referencing illegal restructuring of assets through child guardianship. Dennis had used me in my adoption as a legal loophole to launder money through family trusts. I was his perfect cover story. The next morning, I went back to the police again. This time, I brought the USB, the adoption papers, and my recording of Dennis's confession. But when I got there, I saw the same face behind the desk. Officer Hall. "Well, look who's back," he said, smirking. "I have proof," I said, my voice shaking. "Financial fraud, estate embezzlement, even He raised a hand. "Slow down, you know these are serious accusations. Maybe you should calm down before you say something you regret." Calm down. That phrase hit like a slap. I left the station in tears, clutching the papers. I didn't realize until later that he'd slipped one of the files from my folder when I set it on the counter. When I tried to retrieve it later, it had gone missing. That night, I had my first full-blown panic attack in years. I woke up gasping, convinced someone was standing at the foot of my bed. My therapist called it hypervigilance, but it felt more like drowning in fear that never ends. The next few weeks were a blur. My depression medication wasn't working anymore, no matter how Dr. Rowan adjusted the dosage. I barely ate. I'd stand in the kitchen at 2 a.m. with the refrigerator door open, staring at the birthday cake I bought for Caleb, but couldn't bring myself to serve strawberries and all, just like Mom used to make. The whispers in town got worse. Someone I didn't even need to ask who leaked the adoption scandal online. My phone blew up with messages. "So your real parents sold you," one said. Another, "Guess that's why you turned out like this." At the grocery store, the same clerk who once pitied me now couldn't meet my eyes. "I saw your name trending again," she murmured. "It's just so sad." That's what people called it. But it wasn't sad. It was deliberate. Dennis had stolen not only my inheritance but my identity. He poisoned my community against me. And when I finally got a copy of the police report Officer Hall had filed, I saw he'd written my statement entirely, claimed I'd accused the wrong person. The betrayal wasn't just Dennis anymore. It was systemic. Everyone who'd known, everyone who'd looked away, everyone who'd taken a bribe. I was losing everything again. One evening, Paul came over exhausted but determined. "I've been digging," he said, setting down a laptop. "You need to see this." He showed me a spreadsheet of rows of payments funneled through shell corporations tied to Dennis's construction business. The amounts matched the missing estate funds. But there was something else, the pattern. Every few months the transfer went to Hall and Associates Consulting. All. Paul looked at me. "He's not just covering it up, he's part of it." I remember laughing, the kind of laugh that hurts your ribs. "Of course he is," I said. "Of course they all are." We decided to take everything to a journalist, a small local investigative reporter named Naomi Cross, who'd once covered corruption in the same county. I met her at a diner off Route 14. The air smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. Naomi listened in silence as I showed her the documents. When I finished, she just said, "Brooklyn, if what you're saying checks out, this isn't just embezzlement, this is organized crime." Her words sent chills through me. The next day, she called. "I found something you need to see." She emailed me an audio clip. It was Dennis again, only this time, it wasn't about money. It was about me. "She thinks she's one of them," he said, his tone dripping with cruelty. "She has no idea why we really adopted her. Let's just say the IRS isn't as dumb as they used to be." Then laughter. "She was just paperwork, useful paperwork. Useful paperwork." That night, something in me hardened. All my life, I'd been told to keep the peace. To be polite. To let family handle family. But this time, I wasn't going to let them bury me in silence. I was done being the victim. It was time to make Dennis choke on his own lies in front of everyone. And I knew exactly where I'd do it, at the next family gathering. The one he was hosting. The day of the family gathering, October 14, 2023, felt unreal. I parked my car in Dennis's driveway, the wet leaves sticking to my shoes, and I could smell that same old cigar smoke wafting from inside. Rush hour traffic had been hell on the way over, and I was late, my chest tight with anxiety. Paul followed, carrying my laptop and a small speaker. Inside, the house smelled like stale beer and fried chicken. Dennis was greeting everyone with that fake, wide smile, shaking hands and dropping jokes. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every whisper behind his back felt like a knife. I could see Aunt Linda glance at me and quickly look away, her eyes full of guilt. I felt Caleb tug at my sleeve. "Mom, do you have to?" His small hands clutched mine. I knelt down and whispered, "Yes, honey, this ends today." I took a deep breath, standing at the center of the living room. "Everyone, can I have a minute?" My voice was shaky at first, but it carried. Dennis's smile faltered. "What's this, Brooklyn?" he asked, his tone casual but tight. I lifted my pink iPhone case and tapped the speaker. The recording started, Dennis's drunken voice spilling all his secrets. "I'll never let Brooklyn know the trust under my name now. She's too emotional to fight back anyway." Then Officer Hall, "Just make sure my cut's there by Monday." Dennis again, "She thinks she's one of them. She has no idea why we really adopted her. Let's just say the IRS isn't as dumb as they used to be. She was just paperwork, useful paperwork." The room went silent. I could hear the faint drip of the kitchen faucet, the hum of the refrigerator, the shuffle of nervous feet. Dennis's face turned crimson, his jaw twitching. "You played this?" he stammered, pointing at me. "Yes," I said. "Everything you've done, every lie, every theft, every betrayal, I have proof now, and so does everyone here." I'll press play again, louder this time, letting the audio loop as my relatives stare, their faces pale. Aunt Linda whispered, "Oh my God, Dennis." The shocking revelation hit like a tidal wave. My cousins looked at me like I'd been telling the truth all along. Friends who'd been suspicious now nodded grimly. Whispers of shock and disbelief filled the room, layered with a faint smell of wet dog from Scout, who had somehow sneaked in from outside. Dennis's knees buckled slightly. "Brooklyn, You lied to Mom on her deathbed," I interrupted, my voice cracking but firm. "You drained her estate. You used me as a legal loophole for your fraud, and you destroyed our family to protect yourself." He went pale, then red, then silent. Someone, my cousin, finally stepping into the light, pulled out a phone and called the police. This time, they couldn't ignore it. Officers arrived within minutes. Dennis tried to protest, but his words fell on deaf ears. Officer Hall was nowhere in sight. Apparently, the state attorney had dispatched independent agents after Naomi Cross's expose went live online. The room felt heavy. Tears rolled down my face. Hall grabbed my hand. Caleb stared wide-eyed, clutching his toy car. "I can't believe it." And Linda murmured, her voice breaking. "I should have known." Dennis was handcuffed and led away, muttering threats that sounded hollow now. The others involved were the lawyers, accountants, hostess, and cousins who were also being investigated. My family's trust shattered, but the truth had cut through the web of lies. As the adrenaline faded, I noticed the cake at Mom's favorite, strawberries on top, was sitting untouched on the counter. I cut a piece for Caleb. The sweetness tasted like victory and grief mixed together. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the living room, the house smelling faintly of cigar smoke and fried chicken, thinking of all the lost years of the panic attacks, the social isolation, the nightmares. My depression medication hadn't worked, my friends had abandoned me, and my reputation had been smeared across town. But I had survived. I had fought. Dennis had tried to turn my strengths into weaknesses, my empathy, my loyalty, my desire to keep family together, but it hadn't worked. I had exposed him. I had reclaimed my identity, even if it came in pieces. And then I understood something fundamental. I was no longer alone. Paul had stood with me every step, Caleb needed me, and now a network of survivors, people who had been through similar betrayals, began reaching out to me. They understood what it felt like to be used, silenced, and abandoned by those you trusted most. I cried again, but this time it wasn't just grief. It was relief, rage, and something like hope all tangled together. By confronting Dennis, by taking back my story, I realized I could finally breathe. And for the first time in years, I knew I was the hero of my own life. The days after Dennis's arrest were worse than anything I'd imagined. It should have felt like victory, but victory tastes bitter when the cost is everything you've ever trusted. My phone blew up with calls from reporters, old family friends, and strangers who had read Naomi Cross's article. Some were sympathetic, others were cruel. One afternoon, I went to the grocery store to pick up milk for Caleb. The same clerk who had once pitied me now shook her head before I could say hello. "You're her," she whispered, voice tight. "The one in the news, I'm sorry." I wanted to crawl into a hole. Everyone was watching. Whispers followed me through the aisles. Fraud, adopted for money, what a scandal. Even the little kids in Caleb's school had started repeating the rumors. At home, the air felt heavier than ever. My depression medication still wasn't working. Dr. Rowan doubled my dose, but it was useless. I had nightmares every night, waking up screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced Dennis or Officer Hall was in the room, waiting to undo everything. Paul tried to help. "Brooke, you have to eat," he'd say, pushing a plate of food in front of me. But I couldn't. I barely moved, hardly spoke, and Caleb started asking why Mommy was crying so much. The betrayal didn't end with Dennis. I learned that some family members had been complicit for years. Aunt Linda had signed off on minor financial transfers, knowing Dennis would divert the funds. Even my trusted lawyer had taken small bribes to look the other way. My life, my parents' legacy, everything I thought was safe, was a lie. I stopped leaving the house. I slept in Caleb's room some nights, clutching him like a lifeline. The air smelled faintly of wet dog because Scout had curled up with us. I couldn't bear to be alone, but being around people terrified me too. Every knock at the door made me jump. Every phone vibration made my chest pound. Therapy became a lifeline. Dr. Rowan introduced me to endo sessions to process the trauma, but every flashback brought me to tears. One afternoon, after a particularly rough session, she said, "Brooklyn, this abuse rewired your thinking. Your nervous system doesn't know you're safe yet." I realized she was right. Every trust I'd placed in someone, in my uncle, my family, even the legal system, had been exploited. My sense of safety had been stolen. My depression was more than sadness, it was the aftermath of systemic betrayal. I even started having panic attacks during mundane tasks. One morning, trying to write checks for Caleb's school fees, my hands shook uncontrollably. My vision blurred, my heart raced, and I had to call Paul to finish them for me. Public shame followed me everywhere. I cancelled appointments at work, and my clients whispered behind my back about the scandal. Even friends who hadn't believed the rumors drifted away, afraid of being associated with me. I was completely isolated. Finances were another nightmare. The estate Dennis had embezzled left me with nothing. Our $1,200 a month apartment suddenly felt unaffordable. I considered moving far away, but I couldn't leave Caleb. One night, I sat in the dark living room, Scout's muddy paws on my lap, Caleb asleep beside me, and I whispered to the walls, "Why did this happen? Why me?" My voice cracked, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly powerless. Even therapy couldn't erase the sense of betrayal that seemed to live in my bones. I replayed every memory, every interaction with Dennis, every moment I trusted someone blindly. My pink iPhone case sat untouched on the counter, a constant reminder of how vulnerable I'd been. And yet, despite all this, there was a seed of determination. Every document I had, every recording, every shred of proof reminded me that I could fight back. Dennis had underestimated me. And though I was broken, I wasn't finished. But at that moment, lying in the dark, panic returning in waves, it was impossible to see beyond the devastation. I had lost friends, family trust, financial stability, and almost my own sanity. I was at rock bottom, and it was terrifyingly real. The first step toward rebuilding my life came slowly, painfully slowly. I started by leaving the apartment that held too many memories of fear and betrayal. The $1,200 a month lease was a financial strain anyway, and staying there felt like living in Dennis's shadow. Paul helped me find a small townhouse a few blocks away. The smell of fresh paint replaced the lingering scent of wet dog and old cigar smoke. Therapy became a constant. Dr. Rowan suggested group sessions with survivors of family betrayal. At first, I resisted. Sharing my story felt impossible. But then I met people who understood the exact kind of suffocating manipulation Dennis had inflicted. Listening to them, I realized I wasn't weak. I'd survived something most people couldn't even imagine. I started rebuilding routines. Mornings began with walks with Scout even when the rain soaked us both. Afternoons were spent organizing the estate documents, ensuring Dennis couldn't touch a single cent more. I created a spreadsheet of every recovered asset and every claim pending against the remaining accomplices. Each item checked off felt like a tiny victory. I also took concrete steps to reclaim my social life. I started small, coffee with Paul, lunches with a friend who had finally apologized, and even Caleb's school play, where I cheered louder than anyone. I realized that trust could be rebuilt slowly, but only if I was willing to give it carefully. One night, after a particularly long therapy session, Dr. Rowan said something that hit me harder than any diagnosis. You survived someone who tried to erase you. That's not just resilience, Brooklyn, that's power. I clung to that. I started a private support group online for adults who had suffered family betrayal, embezzlement, or adoption fraud. Slowly, the network grew. Messages poured in. I thought I was alone. You give me hope. I never believed I could fight back, but now I see it's possible. For the first time, my pain became a source of purpose. I shared my story not for sympathy, but to empower others. I spoke at local community centers about financial exploitation, giving workshops on identifying red flags, keeping records, and trusting instincts. Caleb flourished too. The world outside our townhouse felt safer, lighter. We baked strawberry cakes together on weekends, a small, sacred ritual savoring the sweetness Mom had once made for us. It was our way of reclaiming joy in a world that had tried to take everything. I still have scars. Nightmares come, though less often. Panic attacks appear, though I can catch them early with the grounding techniques Dr. Rowan taught me. But I've transformed the trauma into vigilance, not fear. I've learned to honor my feelings, trust selectively, and assert boundaries without guilt. One quiet afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, Scout at my feet, Caleb building Lego towers nearby, and I realized how far I'd come. The estate was partially recovered, Dennis and his accomplices were facing charges, and I had rebuilt my life from ashes. I finally understood that the betrayal that once consumed me could no longer define me. I looked at my pink iPhone case, still cracked in one corner from a dropped panic attack months ago, and smiled. It was battered, but it worked just like me. I'd built a life on the rubble of lies, reclaiming identity, security, and joy. I had a support network that understood my journey, friends who had returned, and a family of choice who had proven trustworthy. Most importantly, I had my voice. And now, no one, not Dennis, not Officer Hall, not anyone could take that away from me. I was free.